How's it going, Andrew?
What's up, Matt?
Not much. Back in the studio again. Well, studio, I mean cinder block boardroom.
Back in the trustee's office, trustee's boardroom.
Right. What have you been up to?
Oh, not too much. Been pretty busy with masonry stuff. We had the fellowcraft degree. Then I went to South Shore to do an degree. Do you want to hear something messed up?
Uh-oh. What do you got?
I had been asked to learn second craftsman. And something about me thought that second craftsman and second base were the same thing.
Uh-oh.
And so I had been talking to Grant, our worshipful master, and I said, oh, yeah, I'm learning second base. And he goes, I'm doing second base that night. And I go, oh, good. You know what? I actually hadn't learned my parts yet. I had told Byron over there that if he could find someone else, great. Otherwise, I would learn it. And I asked Grant this a while back, and he just said, yeah, I got it. And I went, oh, sweet. I'm not going to have to do that. So then as the degree's going on, I start counting heads, and I go, wait a second. Oh my God, second craftsman's a different thing. And I go, oh my God, I didn't learn my stuff. So I go running over to Byron. I'm like, I was supposed to be second craftsman, right? He's like, yeah, duh. Like, that's what I asked you to do. And I was like, oh my God. So we worked through it.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean,
was cold sweating the whole time, being like, I'm so bad. So we ended up having to do some, I've never been more humiliated. Never again.
You probably got it pretty close. I was asked to be seafaring man one time 5 minutes before everything was going to start, and I was shocked at how fast I could learn it, mostly.
So what have you been up to?
I was in Chicago over the weekend for probably one of the most extravagant and opulent weddings I've ever been to. It was for my wife's cousin. He was marrying a girl from a well-to-do family, so everything was at the Drake Hotel. And
that's a fancy hotel, right?
Oh, yeah. It's like 100 years old. It used to be the haunt of like Walt Disney and George Gershwin. And
wait, the haunt of or haunted by?
The haunt of,
okay,
not haunted by.
Sure.
In fact, the room they got married in used to be a regular hangout for those two. And then one of the bars has the initials of Joe DiMaggio and Marilyn Monroe carved into it from when they were newlyweds. And pub that was in there that Olivia and I stopped at opened the day after Prohibition ended. But when I say extravagant, I mean this thing was extravagant. We went down on Friday, even though the wedding ceremony wasn't until 6 o'clock on Saturday. But we went down Friday because all the family that was guests at the wedding were invited to a 3-hour Chicago river cruise.
Oh.
Yeah, with open bar and food and everything else, which was a nice way to start the party. Got to meet a lot of the people that were going to be there the next night. And then the ceremony the next night was at 6 p.m. It was a Jewish wedding. I'd never seen one of those before. It's actually a beautiful wedding ceremony. I really enjoyed it. And then at 7 o'clock, there was a little cocktail hour before dinner. You're typical, except we walked into the room where the cocktail hour was, expecting some small hors d'oeuvres, and there was a full spread. I'm talking like a full-on buffet-style sushi station, slicing brisket, clams, oysters, the whole 9 yards. It was out of control. It would have been enough for dinner without having dinner. But after that was over, which lasted about an hour and a half, we went and sat down for a 5-course dinner. And there was velvet tablecloths and velvet napkins on the plate. I actually took a minute to look around for the real napkins because I was like, wait, I'm legitimately supposed to wipe my face with this? And it was gold-plated silverware and just insane. And then more food came out later in the night, and then more food came out at the after party, and the whole thing was open bar. The groom was in like a $2,400 a night suite that was big enough to play cornhole in, because they set up cornhole boards in his suite and were playing during the day of Saturday.
The classiest games.
Yep, exactly. So when I say it was opulent and extravagant, it totally was. And if you're friends with me on Facebook, I posted a ton of pictures. So it was something that I will probably never get to experience again.
Well, you could even go to weddings for people who are really well off and they wouldn't go to that extreme. That's insane. I mean, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and the family was awesome to talk to. So it was great. It was a really good time, and it was really interesting to see that little slice of life.
Very cool. Well, I think it's probably time we kick this puppy off.
Loosen up your ties and roll up your sleeves. It's time for fellowship with Matt and Andrew. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are not necessarily the views and opinions of the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin or any other Grand Lodge or any appended body.
Alrighty, we are back again, and we have a wonderful guest. Can you introduce him for us, Matt?
We do have a wonderful guest. He was actually the person that you may have heard me talk about on an earlier podcast when I discussed how I got into Freemasonry, and his dad's already been on the podcast. So we have today with us Brother Ryan Thiele, former or past State Master Councilor of DeMolay. And yeah, how's it going, Ryan?
Very good. How are you guys?
He's also a member of our lodge as well. So he's not only a DeMolay lad, he's also a brother. Well, no, just a normal brother.
I introduced him as Brother Ryan Thiele.
Welcome, Ryan Thiele, everyone. What's going on, Ryan? Thanks for coming to visit us for once in your life. I'll make that.
It's good to be back. It's been a while since I've been to lodge. School takes up a lot of time. It also doesn't help that I live an hour and a half away now in Madison.
Yeah. We won't talk about the fact that you're all the way out in Madison and you never come see us at your mother lodge.
And then we miss you, and then you never visit us.
But you sound like my parents. Like, oh, we don't see you much. You don't call. You don't write.
Well, I mean,
we never got even one letter.
Right. We are brothers, so it's like family, right?
Does texting count as writing?
No, I want a handwritten letter written to the secretary to be read out loud.
We're on Discord together.
It can't even be typed out. It has to legitimately be handwritten.
Well, my handwriting is like chicken scratch, so.
Who's this?
Touche, yeah, especially these days.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be fun to have, I'd love to sit in lodge and watch Dave try to decipher your chicken scratch as you wrote a note of, I've missed you guys, all this stuff.
Actual
I would appreciate
hieroglyphics.
it. Yeah, I'd appreciate it.
Do you want to kick off the questions, or?
Let's hit him with the standard question. How'd you become interested in Masonry? Why the heck are you here? Why are you staying here? What's going on?
Yeah, well, you heard from my dad, Jeff, a couple episodes ago, describing how he got into Masonry, and I was on the tail end of that. I came to a spaghetti dinner. Actually, it might have been the Halloween dinner, Spooketti.
That was my first event.
Yeah, 2011. If they were still doing it then, but I know it was around that time because I showed up in my little taekwondo uniform, and I'm 11 years old, and conveniently there was a DeMolay booth there.
Oh, nice.
And got to talking to them, and so when I turned 12 in January the next year, put in my petition, got my degrees maybe a month or two later, and then I was in DeMolay. When I turned 18, my dad's birthday gift to me was a Lake Lodge petition. He was the first line signer, and he promised to pay my dues while I was in school. So that was how I got into Freemasonry, which I was already going to join anyway. And so I did all 3 degrees right before I went off to college that August or September. Then I gave back probably during winter break, something like that, just to, close the loop. And been a member ever since. So 6 years now, almost 6 years.
We're going on 6. We went through our degrees together, so yeah.
And that was really fun because we knew each other from working together, and then I remember studying and learning about Freemasonry together in your truck when it was raining at work, or if there was a downtime at work. So that was really cool to go through that experience together.
Yeah, no, that was a lot of fun, and I think it helped me with my posting work a lot. I think we both benefited from the experience of extra study time like that.
Yeah, definitely. I think I had the advantage because I was in DeMolay for 6 years by then. So ritual was not a foreign thing to me, but it was to you. So it was very beneficial to me because not only could I teach somebody, but I was almost re-experiencing ritual for the first time through you, which elevated my sort of, beginning education of Freemasonry.
It's always kind of nice when, we have a couple of candidates getting their degrees around the same time, because when I've done mentoring, I've done it solo where there's just one guy, and that's fine. That's fun. But there's something that's always super special when you have a second buddy it's not really your mentor, but it's like your mentor is like that's your guy. Like, he's going to help you at events. He's going to be somebody you can look up to be like, hey, like, I don't know anyone in this room. Holy crap. What do I do? And you're like, hey, I'll show you around. I'll help you meet somebody, something like that. But then when you have your sidekick, like your partner in crime, you can have that second person, and it can get a little bit competitive where you're like, I need to make sure I'm studying because there's no way that I'm going to fall behind, my sidekick. We got to do this together. So I always think that's a cool experience to have when you can have that.
Yeah, especially when I had my dad at home and I hadn't left for college yet. So getting to practice at home with him, and then especially over the summer, do it again at work, So
here's a big question. Was your posting word perfect?
Probably not. No way. I'm very big, and I'm
No. You were, and so was I.
yeah.
Your Master Mason one may not have been, but
probably not.
Entered Apprentice and Fellowcraft ones, we both went.
Fellowcraft for sure, because that was my favorite still is my favorite of the three. But no, very much a performance guy. If you have to replace words with synonyms, it doesn't detract from the ritual, in my opinion. So yeah, being word perfect probably wasn't my goal. For my dad, it probably was.
I mean, it's like when you think how many musicians go on stage, and yes, they're practicing with what they know it should be, but when they're performing, they go, hey, if it's gonna change, it's gonna change in a good way. And then you can always study later. I've always said that when the degree's happening, it's like jazz, where you're like, you're inspired, you should be as close as you can. But I would rather you switch a word for a similar word and keep going than be stopping the whole thing and ruining the flow and being prompted or something like that.
I mean, Jimmy Page, he obviously knew his songs, but he used to just improvise up on stage, and Jimi Hendrix for sure. And that's kind of some of the best ritual I've ever seen, was people going on tangents where none of the words were in the ritual, but the principles were the same, right? And so they made it up on the fly and then brought it back to whatever their actual part was. And they just went off into that left field for a moment and then came back, and it was like, wow, that's absolutely incredible. But not everybody can wing it like that,
Yeah, and it's hard because, as Masons, we're trying to impart a very specific thing. So, it's a little bit discouraged to go too far off the beaten track, but there's certain places for it too. Like, I've seen people before or after the charge add some extra stuff, and that's not really in the the meat and potatoes of the degree, where they've been like, no, I want you to focus on these words, and they'll add a little improv before and then do it to the books, where in some of those places I've seen, I've been like, that's pretty cool. I don't hate it.
And that's why performance is so important. I mean, you can have two guys, both of them word perfect, but if one guy is, he's incredibly animated, if the part requires it, right? Rather than being, a marble statue. I mean, that can really elevate the degree or the other part, crank it up to 11. So,
well, and you'd be surprised that even if the candidate's hoodwinked, the sound of an animated performance comes through in the voice, even if they can't see the motion. And so even if you're animated in your movements, and that's more for the brothers on the sidelines, that's awesome. It's still when you see people doing voice acting for cartoons and stuff, they're acting it out sometimes because it reflects in how it's delivered. And I think that, when you're a beginner ritualist, you can memorize your lines and you can deliver them and find your way and make your way through without getting prompted. Great. But when you take it to the next level, it's when you're like, oh my God, was King Solomon here with me, dude? You're like, oh God.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's fascinating now as a state ritual advisor for Wisconsin DeMolay. And I work with the youth to put together our state degrees. And part of the degrees are a play about Jacques DeMolay in the Inquisition at that time. And it's absolutely fascinating to watch these kids act out these parts. And this kid, he's 16 years old, and he's the Master Inquisitor. And it's like, wow, that's weird, but it's fun to watch.
Right.
So.
That's like drama or performance where you're like, for that moment alone, he was the Inquisitor.
Yeah, right. For 15 minutes, this guy is some guard in medieval France, so.
Well, and it's important to, fill that character, the best you can and really bring it to life, because that makes the lessons of everything have more impact as well, and probably stay with you longer if it comes with a performance. It'll be more memorable, and it'll impart more upon somebody.
And even for the ritualist who's doing it too, like taking on that character can help impart the lessons that character's teaching on you, because you're really intimately inserting yourself into that ritual. And for a moment, you're trying to be the character in it. And I feel like there's something very, transcendent about doing something like that too.
Right.
I think we're gonna draw this back. We went down a ritual performance tangent that I wasn't really expecting there, but we always told people tangents will happen.
I live in the rabbit hole.
Yeah, I told you guys this has to be a 3-parter, like a lot of tangents.
I got a couple questions I want to make sure we get around to. So obviously you became a Mason at 18 and you aged out of DeMolay at 21. So you had 3 years of overlap of Masonry and DeMolay. And during that time you were in the state administration for DeMolay at one level or another.
Yep.
What was it like to live in both worlds, so to put it?
Sure. There's a lot of overlap. I mean, the DeMolay ritual was written by Frank Land and his friends, and they were all Shriners and Scottish Rite guys. And so if you read the ritual, the words may be different. The principles are the same. In fact, I would argue that the structure is the same. And so there's a lot of overlap, to go back to our ritual conversation. But in terms of practice, yeah, there's a lot of overlap. It was definitely weird being an active DeMolay, and then when I was elected state master councilor, it was very weird to also be a Mason. I don't think a lot of Masons, especially when I would visit lodges in Madison or visit lodges elsewhere to promote DeMolay, they would be surprised that this young guy is putting on his apron. You're like, are you sure?
Right.
And,
right.
So, but on the other hand, those connections, those lessons amplified my abilities and the way that I thought about the fraternity and what our role is. And by fraternity, I mean both DeMolay from the youth perspective, but Freemasonry as the adult. And what's its role in society? Because, like I said, they're very, very similar.
What's its role in society? What's your opinion of its role in society?
Okay, that's a good one. I know that a lot of people, I think a big theme that you guys tackle is that everybody comes from a different background into Freemasonry. Some people are policemen, other people are, accountants at big companies, others are day laborers, right, or plumbers and so forth, bus drivers. And I think Masonry's role, I suppose, is banding together the different factions in society, or the different components of society, and instilling a common purpose. We're not a religious organization in the sense that we have, a religion or something like that, right? But it kind of fulfills a similar role in bringing people together, educating on common principles, and then hoping that we can hold each other accountable. Rough ashlar, perfect ashlar, right? Mm-hmm. So, and it transcends the beauty of Freemasonry, from what I've seen, is that it transcends race, ethnicity, class, right?
At its best.
At its best. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we don't always live up to that. But that again goes back to the rough ashlar, perfect ashlar. It's their journey towards it.
It's the human within it that always complicates things.
It is, yeah, sure. Right, for sure.
Yeah, and I think that you know, with what you're saying too, like so much of society is bound by illusion. And one of the biggest illusions are the ways that we box ourselves into small little boxes. And I think that when we consider ourselves light bringers, light dispels, you know, the darkness, and the darkness is, and, you know, I can't say an illusion for an illusion because that's not a symbol for an illusion. You know, that's one of the things that it targets is like, this isn't real. You're like, you guys are making up things to divide yourselves. And if we could only have a way to come together from different walks of life, whether it's, you know, race, politics, religion, you know, whatever other ways we can find to divide ourselves, like, oh, he doesn't like the Packers and I like the Bears. How could we ever hang out? I mean, I still try to work on that every day, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and so like in that way, it's super special because so many groups through time, current time and history have worked actively to create barriers between people. And the reason Masonry receives so much hate throughout history is because it's from the groups that want to keep you in boxes that are easily, you know, it's like, hey, just, I'm going to monopolize your consciousness. You're going to focus on me. And Masonry says, no, these are illusions. You should be able to mix and mingle and still, like, you know, have your own personality and your own, you know, beliefs and all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't have to be divided to still hold true to whatever you believe in either.
Right. And I think it's necessary now more than ever, especially considering how polarized our society is at times. As somebody who went to college, I'm now completing my master's in political science and law and policy. So I'm at the forefront. I see it, and it's incredibly difficult to read the statistics or talk to people who are just in these incredibly polarized camps. But the beauty of it, right? My Masonic background is it's taught me to be very tolerant and open and learn. They may not understand my perspective, but I can at least try to understand theirs, right? And find common ground. We're so much more similar and alike than we are different. And Freemasonry, I think, proves that.
And the fact of the matter is we all have such strong opinions. And I've said this once, I've said it 1,000 times. I'm probably wrong. You're probably wrong. No one is ever truly right about anything for the most part. So when you're standing
I think I
by,
disagree. I think the earth is round.
well, I'm
That's
saying on a lot of things. I'm saying like a lot of
One
things.
plus one is two.
I'm talking, fine. I'm talking about the things that people find ways to argue over.
Sure,
It's
yeah.
usually like no one actually knows the proper, most correctest answer. They're just opinions on things they think based on whatever that work, and that the fact that we divide ourselves based on just being like, you don't need to only hang out with people who think the same way you do. And it's actually not even in your advantage to do so.
Sure.
Because having differing opinions, but common respect and ground allows you to, one, test your opinions, test their opinions, and find which one of yours stick because you actually feel confident, and which ones were actually maybe a little more flimsy to begin with, but you were just fighting for them because you're on a hill and you said, I'm going to fight and die for everything. And you'd be like, well, some of those things you might be like, actually, I don't even have a strong opinion on. Why am I dying on this hill?
Yeah, I agree. And there's a variation, you know, even with people that you agree with, and you find ways to overcome that. You respect them because they're your friends or your family, right? And the same goes for Freemasons.
Respect them because you both work together for a common goal to begin with. So, like, you know,
And
that's another bonding aid.
And you would
too.
hope that because you've gone through the Masonic experience together, right, that speaks to the other person's character, ideally, right? So you know that you're coming at it from the same, hopefully, foundation, and that's something to build off of and work off of. So,
because then you can assume at least they have the best intentions in heart too. So they're not like trying to be opposite. Like if someone's a grumpy curmudgeon, you're like, he still has the best intentions in heart. That's just how he
Right.
expresses himself.
yeah,
Right.
that's always been one of my biggest gripes as a young Freemason, and I've had other friends in DeMolay who've gone on to join Freemasonry with me. Bryce Franzway, you mentioned him in your last episode. He's a past state master counselor. He's now district deputy up there in District 2, Eau Claire, northern Wisconsin.
Mhm.
Good friend, good man. And then, but there's others who didn't go from DeMolay into Freemasonry because they didn't see from some Freemasons the exact same things that we're talking about, right? And you know, it could be a generational thing, but from some youth, if I see an adult who claims to be a Mason acting in what they would think is unmasonic behavior, they're not going to join Freemasonry. So it reinforces this idea of Freemasons need to hold themselves accountable, hold others accountable, especially their brothers. And that's really hard to do. Even coming from the same Masonic foundation, it's hard to do.
Well, it's always easier to hold yourself accountable than it is to hold somebody else accountable.
I disagree. It's really hard to hold yourself accountable too.
Yeah, it is hard to hold yourself accountable.
Let's get into that.
But, whoa, hey, we just disagreed. Oh, there we go.
You know, Matt was saying
Finally
last
happened.
episode, he's like, I ain't agreeing with you all the time. Here
The
we
big
go.
solution you create is the one that you create for yourself.
Personally, I'm constantly my own biggest critic, and I look back at my own actions constantly and berate myself over them if I think they weren't proper. So I think I'm very, very effective at holding myself accountable. Where I struggle sometimes is finding the courage to approach somebody else to discuss what they are doing, because I expect that they should sometimes perhaps come to that conclusion on their own, and other times it's just not, I'm not sure that it's worth the energy. Like,
You don't know if it's going to even be effective.
right, exactly. So I find it hard, unless it's like on a given like task, to hold somebody to like their deadlines and stuff like that. Like, to hold somebody accountable there is easy, but there's somebody else accountable there is easy. But to hold somebody else accountable for their actions and actually have the discussion that could create change is a lot more difficult than me berating myself.
You know, there was some past master wisdom I got when I was a newer master mason. I forget which past master told me. I wish I remembered, but he said, don't judge another person by your working tools. Judge them by theirs. So if you might be like, I'm very good at self-reflection, how could someone else not notice this? You're using how your mind works to look at someone else, and where with someone else that might be not as natural, or they might need a little bit of help. But that's the challenge when you're trying to have that. How can I be effective at this? Is saying, you can't say, why don't you just do it like I do it? Because that works for you, but might not work for them. And I think it takes a lot of knowledge of a brother to know what type of interaction is the one that's going to be the most helpful and the least off-putting, or the most appreciated, that can actually, hopefully, ideally, give you that kind of outcome that you're looking for.
Right. Agreed. It takes a lot of courage to approach somebody else and be like, hey,
Knock it all.
right, pretty much. And explain your position. I mean, explaining your position is important, but you also have to hope that that person's going to be receptive and not start, yelling back at you or something.
Right.
Going into a defensive mechanism.
It goes both ways, right? You know, we would hope that, and this goes for just life and society in general, but especially in Freemasonry, because we all made the same promise, right? To adhere to clean and proper living, and sometimes we fall short of that. On one hand, like you guys mentioned last week during the fellowship charge, we have to be able to go to that brother and respectfully say, I think you messed up, And on the other hand, that Mason hopefully also has to have the knowledge that's like, okay, let's take this in, let's think about this, reflect on it. Is there some truth to what they're saying? Because you don't have to inherently agree, right? And hopefully, because of that respect and that experience, you can have that conversation. It does not happen with a lot of Masons, and then you get into the whole Masonic politics and chit chatting, and it's like, come on,
Yeah, and then trying to find the way where you're doing it in a place of love, not in a place of backbiting, or doing it in in a non-helpful way either.
Right.
And then saying like, how do we, because at the end of the day, it has to be with the goal of brotherly love at heart. And if you're willing to dish it, you have to be prepared when someone comes to you with one of your faults and saying, you know, when I try to approach someone with something, I don't like how they get so defensive. And it's natural because then it can happen just to you. And then you'll be like, what the heck? And you'll be like, no, he's doing the same thing. You have to learn to be receptive and saying like, yeah, like you said, you don't have to always agree with what they're saying, but at least mull it over and think, why is he so motivated to tell me this? And it could be, you know, some parts of his argument maybe you don't agree with, but you'll probably find in that there's some grains of truth to that. You're like, you know, he wasn't mad that I did it this way. It's the way I went about it. It's not that I was wrong. You know, it could be a variety of things, but
At the end of the day, we're supposed to whisper wise counsel, right? So if we're all told that we're supposed to whisper wise counsel to a brother, then every brother should expect to, at some point, have wise counsel whispered to him.
Right. But what happens when that doesn't work? Right. If it's a serious enough issue, what do you do? You know, for example, I'm on a committee at the university where we do a lot of work that's delegated to us by state statute. It has to do with a lot of money and student groups and such. And I had a disagreement recently with a member of the committee where they got pretty animated. And so after the meeting, we got into a room, had the chair in there just to kind of play a witness, and we tried to talk it out as adults. And so you would hope that with that private discussion, just working it out as adults, we kind of quash the issue. But sometimes, you know, things need to get brought to light. Now, I'm not saying that this issue that I had with this person is going to do that. I think we squashed it. But, you know, there's been moments where, hey, we need to, this is a big enough issue, or this person's not getting it, that we need to seriously discuss it in public.
yeah, and I mean, it's like when we were mentioning in the last episode how there's appropriate times for a lot of different courses of action, but the wisdom is learning what's appropriate for what you want to get out of that situation too.
Oh, yeah.
All right, I got a hard question for you.
Ooh.
This one's going to really send us down a whole different rodeo. You're young. Youngest person in this room right now.
By
Barely-
far.
Not by far.
No,
Youngest person in this lodge before we meet and after we meet.
No, but you're significantly younger than Matt. You're not that much younger than
you guys are millennials, right?
I'm 32.
I'm on the borderline.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He's elderly.
He always needs to rub that in, right?
He's elderly. I'm in my prime. You're a young man. What do you think Freemasonry will look like in 20 years? And what type of improvements do you think we need to make right now to accommodate for the Masonry of the future?
Wow.
Improvements.
No kidding.
Worshipful brother Jeff Thiele, your dad, will still be helping in the kitchen at Lake Lodge because he's never left that kitchen and he'll still be there in 20 years.
Yeah, you know, yeah, maybe this is an opportunity for Jeff to really self-reflect. Right? Maybe he needs to get the heck out of the kitchen.
Never leave.
But to be fair though, since he's been in the kitchen, we have a well-oiled machine, and the food is always great, right? So maybe there's a trade-off there. The old guy that just never lets go. Better that than like a secretary or worshipful master role. So if you know, in regards to your question, that's. Of course, you would ask the young guy, right? For one, I think that society right now is having a large discussion about tolerance, right, and diversity. And so my hope is that Freemasonry can lead the charge on that. And it's not going to be easy because younger people who are typically, you know, maybe a little bit more tolerant or open-minded than older generations are still the minority. And I would hope that as they get older and they start taking over lodges, they start getting into Grand Lodge and other appendant bodies and so forth, that they don't forget that. And I think that's the key. So in 20 years, my hope is that Freemasonry reflects that tolerance. And it's not going to be easy, but you would hope that Freemasons are leaders in their community, and I don't just mean leaders as in positions of authority or whatever, but that they're actual good role models. And one could say that they're doing that now, and I think that's true. But there are a large vocal minority that on social media or in their daily lives do not represent Freemasonry. I hope that kind of gets weeded out over time. Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because in the tenets and the core of Freemasonry, tolerance is inherent in its teachings. And as time has gone on, at first Masonry was just, it was like, hey, only, all Christians can dine together, right? Because we're sick of seeing Christians kill Christians. And you're like, okay, we should be able to cross that boundary. And then over time that has expanded where they're like, actually, I think a higher power is, plenty. And so you've seen Masonry always has in its traditions been very tolerant and open to being a leader in that thing. So it's weird to me when I see tolerance being a buzzword that's taboo, even sometimes when I've used it on Facebook in the fraternity where it gets a side eye, like, it's like, is this, and you're like, no, this is something that we try to teach. And I think that younger generations are they have that in their consciousness quite a bit, and they're concerned about it. And it would be a reason that people would turn away from the fraternity if they felt like it was bigoted in any way. It would be a big turnoff for a lot of these younger people. And I think it's something as Masons we need to keep in mind as we move forward to be open-minded and sensitive about how we want to approach this new world. And as light bringers, what does that mean in the 21st century?
Right. And Wisconsin in particular has always been a good role model. We have good relations with Prince Hall.
We were one of the first lodges to do mutual recognition with Prince Hall too.
Right. And the fact that there are some jurisdictions that don't is, I think, disappointing. Right. And Freemasonry hasn't had always the best history, hence the difference in the lodge structures, right? White and black at one point, right? That's just the honest truth. Is that the case anymore? Or now? No, thank God. But there are other really important questions that are being discussed in society and have been for the last couple decades about race, sex and gender, class. And, sometimes we forget that that's a huge driver of social differences. And Freemasonry has, for the most part, I would say, done a really good job of being ahead of that. I think, this lodge is a great example. The members of it are incredibly active, and we have a large lodge, but they come from very different backgrounds, right? There's not a lot of Masons in the lodge that have graduate degrees. There's like 4 of us, right? But there's, and there's a lot of people that just come from very different backgrounds. I think that's the beauty of it. Religious differences, racial and ethnic differences. If Freemasonry can be at the forefront of that tolerance, resembling what, our American values, Masonic values, we're going to be really well put together in 20 years.
So the battle to be fought is to live up to the archetype of Freemasonry, to live up to what we are, to actually put our money where our mouth is and actually live up to our claims and continue. And not saying we haven't. We definitely do that today, is to make sure we don't take a slide backwards, but to keep moving forward, which is actually pretty pertinent because that's our current Grandmaster's stick forward on Wisconsin, and to make sure that we continue to improve ourselves in Masonry as a individual, but also as an organization.
I guess the answer to your question, right, in summary, would be to just go back, read the charges, and live them. The Philocraft charge is my favorite one. So your guys' episode last week was awesome for me, just because I love that degree. And go back, live it. And it's hard when you're going up against what, for many people, is their identity and their values, especially if they've held those views or those values or that worldview for decades. But that's the point, right? That's the point of Freemasonry, is to rise above those barriers and build this beautiful collectivism amongst all different walks of life.
To rise above our rough and rugged Ashland.
It's really hard to get a word in edgewise with you two, by the way. Holy cow.
All right,
Just
your
wanted
turn.
to throw that out there. No, I got nothing to add. It's been a beautiful discussion. You don't want my opinion on thrown in there. You guys put it way more
Well,
eloquently
Matt,
than I ever would.
do you agree or disagree?
With which part?
Yeah.
No, Ryan, seriously, you can, obviously, we're going to read the news and do some events here in a minute, but thanks for coming in. We would love to have you again because there's way more questions, but I'm really happy you came in from Madison tonight to come sit in the lodge. It's a big night, election night. So glad you're here. Good to see you. It's been a minute.
Yeah, I'll be voting no against you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that,
No,
actually.
I appreciate you guys having me on, and I, hope I bring a good, unique perspective to things. One of these days, I'll probably ask you guys to come on so I can promote some DeMolay stuff. But outside of that, I've been getting back into Freemasonry, especially since I'll be wrapping up my master's in the spring, so I'll have more time. So
Excellent.
Sweet. Hey, we love seeing you when you come down. Cool. Well, let's. Today we're just going to do some events. We're running a little bit low on news stories right now. So, quick reminder, you want anything promoted, please shoot us an email at
timeforfellowship@gmail.com.
Yep, let us know.
Or on Facebook or on Instagram or on X.
Yep, anywhere you'd like, just let us know what's going on. We'll be able to pull some more stuff from the next journal, but, running a little low today, so we're just going to do some events. The first event we got going on is on
November 18th, Silas Shepherd Winter Meeting and Installation at Lake Country Freemasons Lodge in Dousman. 9 a.m. coffee and carbs, gavel drops at 10. RSVPs are appreciated. From November 13th to the 18th, Zor Shriners Festival of Trees is going on at the Sparta Masonic Center. Go check that out. From 11:18 to 11:25, the Triple I Shrines Festival of Trees is going on. Also a good thing to go check out. Take the kids, try to win a tree, look at a bunch of pretty Christmas decorations before Thanksgiving.
It's a good way to get into the mood for Thanksgiving.
You're right, in the mood for Thanksgiving. On 11/26, Wisconsin 13 will be doing a rededication at the Brookfield Masonic Center to celebrate their 175th anniversary. Cake and ice cream afterwards. Reach out to the lodge to RSVP. From 11/24 to 12/3, the Zor Shrines Festival of Trees is going on at the Wisconsin Rapids Masonic Center, so look that up if you're in that area. And Andrew, you got the rest.
All right, I'll do the rest of these bad boys. All right, so on 11:30, Burlington Lodge is having their Gentleman's Night. If you'd listened to the podcast we had Trent on, he was talking about that. It's a very fun social event. If you're in the area or outside the area, feel free to stop by Burlington Lodge for a fun night. They're doing beer tastings and a bunch of good stuff. It's open to anyone over the age of 21. On 12/9, so December 9th, Lake Lodge, that's us, me and Matt, we're getting installed, hopefully, depending on how the votes go tonight.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
There'll be an installation of officers going on at Lake Masonic Center. On 12/16, December 16th, we're also doing our Breakfast with Santa event. It's a free pancake breakfast. Santa's there, visiting with the kids. It's a great time. It's an awesome celebration, and I highly recommend it. It's always very, very popular. And finally, I'm going to rapid fire some other installations at you. December 15th, West Dallas Lodge number 291 is doing their installation. So if you're interested in that, check it out. December 16th, there's 2 installations, so choose wisely. We have Washington Lodge 1776. Number 337 is doing their installation officer. That's at 1 p.m. The Oregon Lodge number 151 is doing their installation officers at noon. And on December 18th, the Day of Light Lodge number 358 is doing their installation of officers at 10 a.m.
Excellent.
That's our event.
Installation season is upon us.
Ooh.
Good luck to everybody, and we will talk to you later.
Can't wait to have fellowship with you guys again. Have a good day. Bye.